Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Valvoline and Sparesbox. Don't forget BCW5 on checkout. Today we're back on the Falcon. I know it's been a while. A lot of you guys have been asking about what's happening with it, so we decided to get it back on the channel. We're not yet putting the engine in today though. The reason we're not doing that is because of the current conditions in New South Wales. We can't actually tune it at Haltech, so for that reason I don't want to do any of the performance upgrades as yet. When the new engine goes in, we're going to put bigger injectors, a bigger turbo. It's a high flowed factory turbo that High Spool did for us, and also a bigger fuel pump, so we don't want to be kind of trying to band-aid that until we can get it tuned. So I'd much prefer to do all the handling and suspension side of it, which is what we're actually going to do today. So we've got a set of Shockworks coilovers for the front, and they also supply a really nice adjustable rear shock. We've got a ton of Super Pro stuff, so we've got upper control arms for the front. We've also got front camber kit and a heap of rear bushes, so when we do the rear end, which we're also going to be putting a rebuilt diff with a True Track in it today, and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So let's get into it. Something that's worth mentioning with a lot of these Borg Warner and Dana style diffs is that the drain plug's actually one of the bolts that holds the rear cover on. Now, it is a different size, so if you know what you're looking for, it's easy to find, but if you are new to servicing your own car, it is definitely worth, checking it out, having a look, but it's good to know that the bottom bolt that holds the diff cover on is actually the drain plug. So it's nice and simple. I'm just trying to get this so I don't spill oil everywhere. Pull the bolt out, and the diff will drain if there's still any oil in it. Oh look, there's still some oil in it. And water, looking at that. Yummy. Started removing the rear diff from the Falcon. Obviously, this being a solid axle car, you've got to take the whole assembly out. It's not like a 9-inch where you can just bolt the front of the diff carrier in effectively and change the ratio on the gear set that way. So when you're doing a diff like this, you've actually got to, well, for the most part, remove it from the vehicle to change the LSD. I mean, you could do it in the vehicle, but it is definitely a bit more challenging. Luckily, I've got a second diff that's actually already had the True Track fitted. We had Omar actually at Empire organised another diff shop to put it in for us, so that's all been assembled, and they also supplied the True Track, so made it heaps easier to just go in and out on the same day rather than pull the diff out, take it to Sydney, get someone to put a centre in. But another nice little tech tip while you're working on your car, if you are removing calipers and such, and removing suspension components while you're there, make sure you tie up your caliper. You don't want it hanging on the brake line. I know previously we've shown in videos where the caliper's hanging on the brake line. Those particular videos we were replacing the brake lines, but it is worth mentioning again for anyone who's new to the channel to make sure that you do hang your caliper on something like a cable tie or a metal hook. Generally there's all sorts of stuff you can hang it off, so we're just going to pick a spot on the body here and just zip tie through it and go through the caliper so it's not straining the brake line. Moving our helper bag kit for the interim, it is going to go back in at some point, but what I actually want to do is mount it inboard, because now that we're actually lowering the ute, we are going to be fitting lowered leaf springs today, so proper reset king springs, no blocks or anything like that. But basically it's going to take up the space. We'd need the bag pretty much to end up right up near the top of the rail, so what I'm looking at doing is actually mounting them a bit further inboard and making another little bolting cross member, because there's already mounting tabs on the side of the chassis rail here. That means we can pretty much make a bolting cross member for these, and it'll actually move them inboard about 250 mil. So we don't want to go putting them too far in, because it can sort of risk bending your diff housing, but yeah, once we move it in, we'll actually make tabs that come right under the spring, so it'll spread the load right across the diff housing rather than just being at a single load point under the bag. So yeah, it should work pretty well, but it's not something we're going to tackle today, and it will most likely involve actually making a custom exhaust, because the exhaust on the driver's side basically goes exactly where I would want to put the bag. So it's going to be a little bit more of an involved process than just bolting in one of these kits. This kit works really well for an OEM ride height car, but I want to kind of, I don't know, as usual I'm modifying stuff, so I want to get it a bit lower and make it look a little bit more aggressive, and unfortunately these are going to get in the road. Basically all that's going to mean is this is going to get retired from firewood duty, but for the most part, it'll still be able to tow car trailers and whatnot, so it should be sweet. So we've got our springs here. We've got obviously our 2 original springs that have come out of the car, and our King spring, which is a lowered reset spring here. Well, not a reset spring, it's a new spring that they make. So it's slightly different to the original Falcon springs, where you don't have a heavy duty lowered spring, a heavy duty load spring as your bottom leaf. So it's just a sort of a constant rate pack. But one of the things I do like is it already comes with a Super Pro bush fitted to the front of it, which is going to complement the Super Pro bushes that we're going to put into the rear shackle. It looks like this has never actually had shackle bushes before, and they were actually pretty flogged out, which you couldn't see with the shackle being assembled. So pretty good luck that I've purchased a set of bushes to whack together in this and basically just give the whole thing a refresh. So should be a good thing to go. The other thing I've just noticed, they've actually reversed the spring eye on the back, so that basically moves the spring up higher in the car as well. So as well as being reset, or sorry, not reset, a different rate and a different design, it'll actually reposition it so that it'll sit in a different spot in the body. So this is the left one. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is left and right. To me, they're the same spring, but King have marked them left and right. So we're obviously going to use the information they've supplied, and we're going to fit this one up. Then we're going to actually do the shackle bushes and assemble the shackle before we put it into the ute, because you can't actually split that shackle once it's in there because we've got a tow bar fitted. If it was a non-tow bar vehicle, you'd be all right and you could still spread them. But yeah, because we got the tow bar, it's going to basically hit the side of the tow bar before we can pull it apart. So let's chuck this spring in. We'll completely do the left one, then we'll do the right one, then we'll put our new diff in as well. This spring's heavy. Another thing that we're going to be replacing in the rear end as well as the shackle bush is actually the spring perch bushes, I guess you'd call them. Basically these go between the factory spring, or in this case the King spring, and the shock mounts, and then obviously the U-bolt plates. So these things are definitely well past the use by date. They're all original. I've gone with the Super Pro polyurethane bushes. These things are going to be a lot more durable and not flog out. I mean, to be fair though, these have done over 200,000 Ks, but looking at them, I'd say they probably needed to be replaced well before now. These are the sort of things you don't really see until you start actually pulling the car apart, because they're not sort of perished or split where you can see. Yeah, it's hard to know, but definitely when you are going to change a diff in a Falcon, I'd definitely recommend to lose these and chuck some new ones in, because they're going to be a lot stiffer, and they will do things like stop axle tramp and stop the diff sort of floating around. So it'll definitely help you if you're trying to get a bit faster down the track. We've got the diff out of our other runaround ute, and we're pretty much ready to put it in, but the one thing I did want to do before I actually install it is fill it with oil. So what we're going to do is actually overfill it. So when it's in the car, we'll remove the filler plug, and it'll actually set the height to be correct in the vehicle. It just saves so much time manually trying to hand pump when you're using bottles like 3 or 4 litres at a time. It just pumping 85 140 in, or 80 140, 85 140 in manually with one of the little Tom Thumb pumps. It just takes forever, and I don't have the forearm strength for that anymore. So just going to dump it in with a funnel and keep on trucking, and then we can, as I said, reset the level once it's in the vehicle. we're going to grab the rear shocks out first, and we're going to throw those in because we're nearly finished with the rear end of the car. So I'd rather just finish one end, put the wheels on, call it done. Because the other thing is, those King springs, the rear height's not adjustable. So I want to work out what the rear ride height is, and then we can actually match the front to suit. So got these nice little adjustable shocks, and I pulled them out the wrong way. Rookie error. So they're a really nice unit. They're fully rebuildable and serviceable here in Australia, which I really like. So you don't have to go and buy parts from overseas or whatnot. So, but yeah, the dude's in Victoria, so they do really nice stuff. They built the front struts for the Cresta originally as well, which is still in the car. And the car just keeps getting faster and faster with playing around with the shock settings. So hoping that these things will be really nice. Chris at Shockworks, his old man actually used to work for Ford. He was one of the suspension engineers, and he worked on FGs. So with that sort of knowledge, it's pretty obvious we're going to end up with a pretty quality product rather than something that's just been slapped together overseas. So yeah, pretty keen to chuck these in. Let's keep going. We're partway through the front end reassembly. We've got our brand new Super Pro upper control arms, and we've also got the Super Pro Camber Kit that we're putting together at the moment. The thing I really like about the kit is it actually tells you what shim will give you approximately what changes. So basically the standard geometry is a 6, a 3 and a 1.6 mil shim. So what we're going to do is basically just put the standard geometry back into it, and then when we send it for an alignment, we'll actually send these instructions and the bag full of extra shims, because the kit does come with a lot of extra shims, so that's pretty handy. But yeah, it's super easy to put together. It's all just bolt together. The studs actually slide in, which I think is a nice feature, because then if you do damage them, potentially you can replace them without having to bin the whole kit. But yeah, we're going to basically whack all this back together now. We've already got our Shockworks coilovers in. Well, when I say in, they're bolted to the strut tower. So we'll get these arms in, then we can finish the front end install and hopefully get the ride height set today and send it for a wheelie. We've just fitted the coilovers now to the front, and we've also put our top arms in with our camber kit. We've put the wheels on, brought it down and measured the sill heights, and it's over 100 mil lower in the front than it is in the back. So basically going to crank the coilovers up. We'll add probably 110 mil to the front to basically just get the thing to sit level. And once that's where it is, I think we'll just pretty much call it done. It doesn't need to be super low. It's nice to be a little bit lower, and it'll give it a nice firm ride. But I don't want to go slamming this thing into the weeds. As much as it's going to look cool, it's going to be a pretty useless work ute. So I do want to sort of give it a bit of an update. The original front shocks were totally hammered, so going a coilover setup as opposed to a shock and spring factory setup, it's just more cost effective, and you get a better setup for your money. Before anyone gets too carried away and says that the original shocks and springs were coilovers, yes, you're correct, but everyone calls coilovers that are in it now coilovers. So internet. So we've got all of the front end back into where we want it. We've also got our ride heights where we want them, and we've actually now got the car lowered on stand, so the front hoist arms aren't actually supporting the vehicle anymore. And the reason I'm doing that is so we can tighten the upper control arm bushes at ride height. It does specifically note to tighten them at ride height in the instructions, so doing that properly as we should. It is worth mentioning too, the Super Pro Camber Kit does come with brand new Super Pro bushes to put into the arms. However, because these arms are already brand new and they are rubber, I'd prefer to run the rubber ones to try and keep a bit more of that OEM sort of softness in the front end and not make it too aggressive and too harsh. Obviously we've gone a little bit stiffer in the back, but being that it's in the back, it shouldn't affect the ride quality too much, especially being that it is a ute. So just gonna nip these up both sides, then we'll go back up, put the wheels on, put it on the ground, put the bay back together, and then we're done for the day. Well, we've done a ton of stuff to the Falcon today. It's hopefully going to drive like a pretty much new car. So we've pretty much started in the back end and worked our way forward. We've done rear springs, all new rear bushings. We've got a true track diff in the back of it now, fresh diff oil. Then we've moved forward, we've done Shockworks shocks in the back as well. Shockworks coilovers up front. We've got some new Super Pro arms and bushers and a camber kit. And it's all pretty well tight now, I think. We've also done a service, chucked some Valvoline in the engine, so should be a good thing. It is worth noting too, if you are doing your coilovers on a Falcon or a lot of other double A-arm or multi-link suspension type front vehicles, that adjusting your ride height at the shock doesn't necessarily determine exactly the same measurement at your wheel to guard height. So for instance, the Falcon is approximately 1.5 times at the guard what it is when you're adjusting it at the shock. So for every centimetre you shorten or lengthen the shock, you're adding 1.5 centimeters at the wheel, give or take. So it took us a while to work that out, and Chris from Shockworks actually gave us some figures to work with. So pretty happy with how the car's sitting now. Unfortunately, it did take a bit longer than I'd anticipated, so we'll be getting a wheel alignment tomorrow, which will mean no driving shots today. But we'll pretty much pack it up. It's been a long one, but thanks for sticking around. If there's something you want to know or something you want to say, please let us know in the comments below. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.